Hello and welcome to Change is Possible podcast. My name is Ani Filipova and I'm your host. When I left my banking career to try something new, the number one question everyone asked me was, how did you find the courage? The thing is, it's not about the courage. It is about knowing what you want and planning for it. That's why I started this podcast, to help you make your career change possible. Each of our guests have done a successful career change, and we are going to discuss practical advice, actionable tips, and inspirational stories that can help you to get unstuck and transition into work that you love. Let's get started. Hi everyone, my guest today is Lubomila Jordanova, who is the co-founder and CEO of Plan A. Plan A is a German software company that builds science-based AI-driven tools for carbon accounting, decarbonization, ESG management and reporting. Prior to Plan A, Lubomila worked in investment banking and venture capital, as well as in the fintech industry in Asia and Europe. She was an official speaker of COP26 and currently serves as an Obama Foundation Europe Leader 2022. Lubomila has a lot of recognition, but I'll mention just a few. She is a Marshall Fund Fellow 2021. She was top 50 women in tech in Germany, again in 21, and Forbes 30 under 30, among many others. So I'm so excited to welcome Lubomila. How are you? Good morning. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here.
Let's dive into it. That will be a really exciting discussion. This is one of my favorite topics, climate and what can we do to prevent climate crisis. So let's start with your life and career before Plan A. What did you study? Tell us about it.
My journey has been quite a diverse and interesting one. I first, of course, studied in Bulgaria. I was in a German high school, which allowed me to learn the language and serendipitously then put me in Germany, which kind of now makes my life easier when I do business. I moved at 17 to the UK, where I studied international business in German. And after that, decided to do a master's in management. In between, I worked in investment banking, VC, fintech, and also corporate finance, moving between topics that would be covered under the realm of finance. And essentially, things were continuing on the same trajectory until 2016. I was definitely focused on building a finance career with the deep understanding that this was a important and defining industry for, I would say, the whole economy. But I guess destiny had some other plans in stake.
So when did you decide to get into climate-related areas and why? I mean, what pushed you out of finance and into climate?
2016 for me was quite a challenging but also eye-opening year. I went on a trip to Morocco, which kind of was, I would say, this aha moment where I ended up cleaning beaches instead of surfing for a week. This was not planned. It was something that so happened that essentially on the first day of this surfing trip, I found myself on this beautiful beach that was just covered in plastic. I did what I usually do now when I see trash. It's basically, I started collecting it. Yeah. And after that, I was just not able to stop thinking about this. I felt like there was a level of responsibility I needed to claim. There was a lot of knowledge I needed to develop that at that time I did not have, that would allow me to understand what was my impact on the planet. How was I, with my day-to-day choices, potentially having also negative effects on the health of our planet. And after a year of educating myself, also conducting 2 experiments, one was building a data model that was looking into the worst performing environmental indicators, and the other one was interviewing more than 300 people. I decided that there was nothing else that I could spend my time on, and I would be feeling constantly dissatisfied if I was not dedicating myself to fighting climate change.
Interesting. How did idea about Plan A came about? What happened? Tell us about the journey of creating the company.
In this 1 year of educating myself, I was definitely trying to gather as many perspectives as possible, but some of the learnings were constantly repeating itself, even though they would be coming from different stakeholders. I would be reading a scientific paper and it would be confirming what I would be reading in a business book about climate change. And then it would be confirmed by the speech of an activist on TED. And I started repeating to myself these hypotheses or statements that were always the same. The first one was that businesses had to be at the core of addressing climate change. Any of the data that I looked at, any of the interviews that I listened to, any of the movies that I watched demonstrated how much of an impact our economy had on the health of our planet. The second learning was that there was a lot of science behind all of these statements, and there was a lot of revelations that science was able to give us about the challenges, but also about the solutions, and this was not utilized. It was something that was sitting on a shelf, and it was really not making us better prepared for where we were headed, but it should be. But it was supposed to be actually used on day-to-day basis because it really was structured, it was organized, it was data-driven, it had evidence on the pathway that it was going to take us out of this crisis. And then the final learning was that there was a necessity to bring this into a collaborative structure. There was a necessity to involve all the stakeholders in working with one another to learn how to tackle this issue at core. And businesses were to be the leading force behind this because they were nimble, they were able to move fast, they had capital, but they were never going to be able to do it by themselves if they didn't follow science, if they didn't follow legislation or impact legislation, or if they didn't involve their employees, their customers, and other stakeholders. So these three learnings were, for me, the core of this 1 year of educating myself about the issues, and were also the key hypothesis behind the first version of Plan A, which was essentially a donation platform that was looking into educating businesses and individuals through data, through science on where they should put their money. This concept evolved and it got us to where we are today, but that was the first version for sure.
So you have a co-founder. How did you find this person? How do you find a co-founder in that space?
I think the things that have been happening in the course of the last 5 years of building Plan A have been a mix of calculated risk, uncalculated risk, and serendipity. I think I have been bold enough to believe that in 2016, there was nothing else I could do but fight climate change at a time when people thought that this was an NGO topic. People thought that this was something that was like for the tree huggers, for the scientists, but not for business people. And when I made the announcement that I'm building this donation platform, I ended up getting overwhelmingly positive response on social media. I posted it on Facebook. At that time, Facebook was a big thing.
Yeah.
And the response was like more than 1,000 likes, 100 shares, and also a lot of people offering their volunteering capacity. One of those people was my co-founder. He was coming from just out of another job in Paris and he was looking for a new challenge. He had been working into communication for causes and it felt like a good fit. At first, he didn't start as a co-founder. He worked for the first 6 months as a volunteer. But after that, he kind of moved to Berlin from Paris and the rest is history.
Yeah. So when you started, what were the key obstacles and how did you overcome them? Firstly, I guess it was crazy, right? Not that now it's easier, but what was then?
Well, I think it's never easy to build a company, but definitely building a climate tech company in 2016-17 was additionally complex because there was a lot of misunderstanding of the importance of the issue. There was lack of understanding of the core principles behind getting involved into something of that scale and magnitude as an issue. And the final bit was related to financing. So on the first topic, there was really no interest in many people to get involved. Yeah, sure, there was a lot of people that wanted to volunteer, but the truth is that if I was to ask someone to join me full time, there would be very little interest because people were saying, this is like a nice cause and it's something that is really important to tackle, but I would never work for this full time. The second one was probably connected to the first one. people didn't understand the magnitude of the negative impacts related to climate change. So they didn't necessarily understand what is the likely outcome if we didn't do anything. That was because science was not as broadly popular as it is now. And the final bit was the fact that in all of this, there was no one that was willing to fund this. In the beginning, for the first 2.5 years, I put all my savings from investment banking. My family also put money into the company. I got like some grants from different structures as a donation. But ultimately, there was very little I could play with because there was not any interest in the topic.
Yeah.
Maybe for the context of the listeners, it's important to mention that Plan A today is not a donation platform anymore. We're a software as a service platform for decarbonizing corporates and supporting them on their reporting needs, which means that what we do on day-to-day basis now is a subscription model that allows businesses to assess all of their data, understand where they're standing, and then learn how to improve and report on it. For us to get through to this, we had to work with where the industry was, because a donation platform, even today, is never going to be funded by a venture capital fund that the industry is. Today, we're in a model that is really well understandable by the corporates, by the VCs, by any of the stakeholders that we work with.
Okay, great. So now where you are with the company and looking back, how much of what you planned initially changed? And then if you can just speak about the fact what is to be an entrepreneur in that industry. Just tell us for our listeners who actually are thinking about it.
A lot has changed since the beginning of Plan A. One is that we pivoted the model. We were a donation platform. Then we moved into a climate risk algorithm, which was looking into 300,000 data points related to oceans, forests, wildlife, sustainable living, sustainable energy, and waste management. And then we learned that climate risk assessment was still too far off in the minds of the corporates. So they needed something that was a bit shorter term. And that's where the current platform that we had now has been coming in reality. Another thing that changed was just the perception of the importance of the topic. I feel like there's been a lot of elements of the activities of our society that started to collide and align people's minds around the idea that climate change is the biggest threat to humanity, and there's no other topic that we should be spending more money on and more effort on. And that was confirmed not only by scientists with events such as the release of the IPCC reports, but also through engagements of communities like Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, and also other that have been there to just raise the awareness. I would also add to this the Greentech Alliance, which is a community now where we have more than 1,500 startups addressing different challenges to climate change. What has been quite interesting while building this as an entrepreneur is, first of all, to see yourself as a individual unit of impact, to see how your own thoughts can influence the way people think, and by perseverance, by being stubborn, by pushing forward, how much you can change. We had a lot of education to do in Berlin. When we started, there was no one doing events about climate change. And we've organized by now more than 100 events for more than 30,000 people. And that was every single time explaining what is climate change, why does it matter, what is circularity, what is sustainable living, all of these things. And this persistence has allowed us really to be able to see this through. That was the first phase of it. The second phase has been collecting our ideas and combining them together with the rest of the community. This is a topic that is never going to be tackled in isolation, which means that we need to be working together with others. And from today's perspective, it feels like a lot more of a mature industry where there's money flowing in. There's never been that much money as the amount that was raised last year. There's been an insane amount of people flocking into the topic to get a job. So all of these things kind of were the evolution that we went through. And I'm really happy to have seen this from the beginning and to have been there really to also influence it. And I'm saying this with a lot of comfort and confidence.
It must have been a great transformation, starting from a donation platform and now working with large corporations and banks. And talking about your clients, what is your target market, so to say, or who are your clients that you work with? Who are you targeting?
Plan A works with businesses that are moving fast, scaling fast, but also with complex climate issues. That means that we work with fast-scaling startups, companies that I can mention, Sorar, Flixbus, Urban Sports Club, N26, Grover. And then on the other hand, we have a lot of corporates, Société Générale, Vinci, also a lot of different institutions like the European Commission. All of these organizations are different, but they have a unifying element by the fact that they all have understood sustainability as a core principle of their activities, and they're using our software to learn how to be acting fast in this space.
All right. So you're the CEO of the company and you have so many other engagements. I honestly don't know how you're doing it, but you're great. Describe your usual day.
One thing that I love about my job is the fact that there's not a single day that is the same as another. I don't get into this mindset of, okay, it's 7:00, another Tuesday, another Wednesday, because this just doesn't exist.
Yes.
And I love this. I love this because I'm someone that gets really easily bored and I need this diversity in order to be productive. The day that is happening and the elements that are usual about it is the fact that I meditate every single morning when I wake up. I do some physical activity, yoga, running, or something that can kick me off, have my coffee, regardless of where I am in the world. And then the madness starts. On the things that I maybe have committed to that are more unifying about my agenda is that if I am in the office, if I'm in Berlin or London or Paris, where Plan A has offices, I usually have Monday for internal purposes. So I communicate with the team, we plan things, we set the targets, we understand what's having to happen this week. Tuesdays I have as my strategy days. These are the days when I plan things, when I have a lot of time for myself, where I need to think of the next steps for the company. And then as a next stage, kind of the next days are always depending on agendas, most likely filled with a lot of meetings and phone calls. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of sales still. So I speak to a lot of clients, potential, existing. I do speak to every single employee before they join the company. So I'm the final person that interviews people. And I also speak at a lot of events. These are kind of the 3 key activities that I do alongside strategy. The reason why I spend my time along these things is because I've identified these to be my core strengths. I'm good at these things, and this is where I'm most useful for the company.
No, great. And knowing what your strengths are, that's the key, right? And focus on them. Let's focus on the next questions are about the listeners and what they can learn really here. So if there are young people who like to start a career in climate-related companies, areas, what is the advice you could give them? Do they need a degree? What are transferable skills they should think about? What should they learn? How to go about it?
First of all, what's most important to anyone that wants to join this industry is that there's a lot of need. So please join. And it really doesn't matter what kind of skills you can bring to the table, because actually there's a lot of lack of supply at the moment due to the fact that there's been a lot of funding that went into the industry. There's been a lot of interest on the corporate side. So it doesn't matter if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to join a corporate, or if you want to join a large institution, there's a need for climate experts and climate excited people.
Yeah.
What you need, though, is still a bit of knowledge. That's not necessarily a degree, but at least like having spent some time on understanding the totality of the issue, having spent some time on speaking to people like me, like you, someone that has dived into this and have seen the topic not from the educational side. I've never studied climate. I studied it in my own terms, and it was useful enough to just watch movies, read a lot of books, also read a lot of scientific papers, but ultimately get to the point of in a mindset where I feel comfortable with the topic, because it kind of is not something that is that simple, and it really needs a lot of engagement. So that's something that I would say. And the final bit is to have like this learner's mindset. Mm-hmm. I would say if you would have spent some time on getting excited about the topic, if you would have spent some time then on educating yourself about it, then the final bit is really understanding that you're never going to stop learning. I keep on educating myself up until today on daily basis about what are the latest research papers showing, what are the latest issues, and essentially spending time on making sure that I'm always on top of what's the news, because the truth is that this is an ever evolving issue, and sadly it is evolving faster than we expect. So it means you need to be on top of this to be the most useful self in this industry.
Yeah, no, great that you said that. And I just want to say for the listeners that if you want to read about this, Lubomila is a great source of information. She has a weekly letter, which I personally wait for and read immediately the moment she sends it. And it's a lot of things I personally learned about climate. So go to her profile on LinkedIn and subscribe. Okay, so if we talk about mid-career professionals, people that been in, let's say, finance or any other area, how can they move into the climate tech or that industry? Because for them, it's a bit more difficult, I thought. Is that right? What is your opinion?
The people at this stage of their career have an established way of doing things, an established way of thinking. They've probably established in their career as well. And it's maybe creates a little bit of a barrier into seeing yourself in this totally new field and being this newbie. But being fully honest, as someone that now is with a company with more than 100 people and is constantly increasing the maturity of the professionals that join, actually, first of all, you're much needed. We're now getting to a stage of the maturity of the industry, which is requiring for all of us to think proactively about how do we scale? How do we think in magnitude that is the mindset that the mid-career professional would have, that maybe a person that just left university wouldn't? So take this for sure into account when you're considering a change. The second bit is that there is a lot of ground to be covered because the companies are now not only getting to this mature stage, but also they don't have a lot of time, which means that your mid-career experience is super useful because it's going to allow a company like us, like anyone else, to skip a few steps. Yeah. And then the final bit is related to the expertise you can bring. It really does not mean that you need to become a climate professional to join this industry. Sure, inform yourself a bit about the basics. Don't expect to become an expert very short amount of time. But keep in mind that what you can bring to the table, no one else can. Usually, because of how education has been historically, there's not that many professionals that, for example, come specifically from marketing with 20 years of experience or 10 years of experience that have been able to get to a level of knowledge also about climate. It's just the industry is not there.
Yeah, I understand. And then final is about more senior executives who've been in companies large and small. How could they contribute to the climate industry?
One thing that we're seeing a lot at the moment in the industry is consolidation, which is this moment when a lot of restructuring needs to happen. A lot of processes need to be established for scale, for hundreds, thousands of employees to be managed well. And also there's a lot of, as I said earlier, money now that are going to lead very soon into, I would say, change management, purely for the fact that this stage of management that maybe is in some of the companies that we see in the industry is not at the scale where the industry is going to get to. For senior executives, there's a lot of opportunity to get C-level positions in climate tech companies and also to contribute to their experience for structuring and stabilizing these wonderful ideas that have been turned into businesses that need, though, this kind of expertise in order to scale fast. There's a lot of room for this in Europe, I would say, in particular. And it's really interesting to see our demand as Plan A. At the moment, we have a few C-level positions that are opening, for example, and with the kind of talent that we're seeing coming our way is people with 20, 30 years of experience, totally different profile than many of the people in the company. But what is needed now at the stage where we're getting into Series B and getting into multi-million-dollar contracts and so on that require us to really be thinking at scale that not every single person in the company would have
seen or experienced already, right?
Exactly.
Well, this was a very, very interesting discussion, and we are about the end of the podcast. But any closing remarks, any key learnings and takeaways you want to leave to the listeners?
I think the topic of your podcast is incredibly exciting, especially in the context of climate change. Is probably the most important mindset shift that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Change is possible, and people need to believe in this and know that their skill sets, regardless of where they come from, regardless of the background of their work, of their nationality, they are needed. Mm-hmm. Climate change, unfortunately, is going to be unfolding further, but also in a more positive way. The sustainable economy is going to be the only economy that is going to exist in the next 5 to 10 years, which means that any company would need the skill sets that a senior executive, a mid-level manager, or a junior person can bring to the table. So the sooner you join, the better. And if anyone is obviously looking for an open position that would fit them, they should definitely get in touch, as we have more than 20 open positions at the moment all across the world.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lubomila. I just want to wish you absolutely all the best. I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to grow this company and make a lot of success on the way. Thanks very much and have a great day and week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Change is Possible podcast. I hope you enjoyed. If there is any topic that you're interested in or would like to nominate a guest, please drop me a message via LinkedIn. Have a great day. Bye.